Have you ever noticed how the world doesn't destroy the worst people? It crowns them. The liars rise, the ruthless reign, the heartless walk through fire and come out shining, while the kind ones, the patient ones, are left bleeding quietly in the dark. You played fair. You forgave. You thought being good meant being protected. But the truth is, the world doesn't bow to goodness. It kneels before strength. It rewards those who stopped asking for justice and started creating it. This video isn't here to inspire you. It's here to rebuild you, to burn the version of you that begged for fairness, to awaken the part that doesn't ask. It takes. I will make you a monster, not the kind that destroys everything, but the kind that nothing can destroy, the kind that commands without speaking, moves without mercy, and bends the world to its will. By the time this video ends, the man they ignored will be gone, and in his place, something untouchable will rise. Don't just watch this. Claim it. Leave a comment that would scare your old self. Every monster begins as a man who cared too much. He gave his loyalty to people who saw it as weakness. He offered honesty to those who twisted it into ammunition. He gave everything, and the world showed him what it does to men like that. It doesn't reward goodness. It uses it. At first, he doesn't understand. He believes there must be fairness somewhere, that good intentions protect good people. So he over-explains. He forgives too quickly. He tries to love harder, speak softer, and understand more deeply, thinking effort will equal respect. But effort doesn't earn respect in this world. It earns dependency. And when he finally sees it, the truth breaks him. It's not rage that's born in that moment. It's silence. A silence that feels heavier than anger, sharper than words. Because in that silence, something begins to form. Something the world never wanted him to find. Clarity. He stops believing in fairness. He stops believing in apology. He stops believing that being good guarantees safety. Instead, he begins to watch, quietly, ruthlessly, and sees the world for what it really is. A hierarchy of power, not morality. A system that doesn't protect the pure, but rewards the prepared. That realization kills the old self. The soft, forgiving, hopeful version of him dies right there. And in its ashes, a different mind takes shape. He no longer reacts. He observes. He no longer gives. He calculates. He no longer pleads. He plans. He stops playing defense in a game built for predators and starts designing moves of his own. He is no longer driven by emotion, but by awareness. Not by approval, but by advantage. He studies people not to understand them, but to position himself. He listens to words, but only to identify motives. He learns that loyalty without boundaries is just submission in disguise. Machiavelli once wrote that men are ungrateful, deceitful, and self-serving. So he stops expecting integrity and starts predicting behavior. He no longer takes betrayal personally. He files it as information. He doesn't waste time teaching lessons. He lets consequences do the speaking. He doesn't argue with liars. He simply removes their access. That's what the world calls cold. But it's not cold. It's clarity. He learns that silence is strategy. That patience isn't passivity. It's preparation. That real power doesn't announce itself. It accumulates quietly, like a storm gathering beneath calm skies. He starts moving differently. He doesn't chase, doesn't prove, doesn't explain. Every word he says now has a purpose. Every absence carries weight. His calm becomes unsettling. His restraint becomes power. Because people fear what they can't predict, and he has made himself unreadable. You can see it in his eyes. That quiet detachment that unnerves people who once controlled him. They can't find guilt in him anymore. No vulnerability to exploit, no kindness left to weaponize. He's still human, but untouchable. He feels deeply but chooses nothing out of feeling. He listens to the world, but answers only to his will. The transformation is not loud. It happens in silence, behind closed doors, in the exact moment you decide that peace isn't given. It's taken. That respect isn't requested. It's engineered. That goodness without boundaries isn't virtue. It's suicide. And once that decision is made, you can't unsee it. The game changes. You stop waiting for fairness. You stop chasing closure. You stop fighting for validation from people who feed off your guilt. You become precise, strategic, silent. You become someone the world no longer pities, but studies. That's when fear begins to shift. Not from you, but toward you. They start to hesitate before speaking your name. They sense something calculated, something dangerous, something they can't reach or read. That's when the birth is complete. Because this version of you isn't built on emotion anymore. He's built on truth, carved by betrayal, strengthened by silence, and crowned by clarity. He isn't here to destroy the world. He's here to rule the part of it that once ruled him. Every man starts off believing that goodness is enough, that patience brings peace, that kindness earns respect, that honesty guarantees safety. But over time he learns, none of that is true. The world doesn't protect the gentle, it drains them. Every time you forgive too easily, you teach someone how to hurt you again. Every time you explain yourself, you tell them your weakness. Every time you keep giving chances, you train them to stop valuing yours. And after enough betrayal, after enough humiliation, you finally see it. The gentle version of you was never respected. He was tolerated. That's the version that must die. Killing him isn't cruelty. It's correction. Because the man who bends for everyone eventually breaks for nothing. The process is quiet. It doesn't come with rage. It comes with exhaustion. The exhaustion of always being the understanding one. The exhaustion of constantly managing other people's comfort while they disregard yours. That's when the internal switch flips. The man who once apologized for existing starts to move like someone who owes the world nothing. He learns that detachment is not apathy. It's self-preservation. That boundaries aren't walls. They're doors that only open for those who deserve entry. And that peace doesn't come from being agreeable. It comes from being unavailable to nonsense. Machiavelli said it best. It is much safer to be feared than loved, if one of the two must be lacking. But fear doesn't mean aggression. It means distance. The quiet kind of authority that makes people think twice before crossing you. You don't need to threaten anyone. You simply need to become the kind of man whose disapproval is punishment enough. When you kill the gentle version of yourself, you stop living through emotion and start living through structure. You begin to think strategically, not sentimentally. You no longer do things to be liked. You do them to be effective. You stop seeking validation from the same people who feed off your compliance. That's when people start saying you've changed. They'll call you cold, distant, selfish, because they can no longer manipulate your warmth. They'll tell others you've lost your empathy, when in truth you've just stopped distributing it freely. You stop explaining your silence. You stop defending your decisions. You stop trying to make people comfortable with your evolution. Because the ones who are meant to stay will adjust. And the rest were never aligned with your rise anyway. The man who once wanted to be understood starts realizing that understanding is overrated. What he wants now is control. control over his time, his focus, his reactions. He learns that peace is not found in forgiveness. It's found in consequences. The new version of you doesn't argue. You withdraw. You don't chase closure. You create distance. You don't beg for loyalty. You observe behavior quietly and adjust access accordingly. You begin to see the game for what it is. The loudest ones crave validation. The kindest ones crave belonging. The dangerous ones crave nothing. Because the man who no longer needs approval can move freely, without hesitation, without fear. You don't hate anyone. You just stop explaining your love to those who couldn't understand its value. You don't wish harm. You just stop protecting people from the weight of their own choices. You stop trying to fix the unfixable and start perfecting yourself. It's not arrogance. It's evolution. The death of the gentle man is the birth of discipline, and discipline is the quietest form of power. He no longer asks, "Why would they do this to me?" He asks, "What allowed it?" Because awareness turns pain into data, and data into control. By the time the transformation settles in, you're not bitter. You're precise. You've stopped searching for peace in people and started creating it in isolation. Your silence becomes sharper. Your presence heavier. Your detachment unshakable. And the world that once took you for granted now studies your distance with fear. They can't read you anymore. They can't reach you anymore. Because the man who once begged for fairness now builds it for himself. One boundary, one silence, one calculated move at a time. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. And clarity is the first sign that you're finally becoming untouchable. The first form of power is awareness. The second is control. Control over emotion, reaction, and timing. Because emotion is what the world uses to keep you predictable. The ones who can trigger you can control you. They pull your strings, and you call it passion. They provoke you, and you call it honesty. They manipulate you, and you call it love. But once you start mastering your emotions, the entire system collapses. You realize anger doesn't need to be expressed to be effective. Silence can humiliate louder than shouting ever could. Indifference can cut deeper than revenge. You begin to see that emotion is not a command. It's a signal. You feel it, process it, and move on. Not as a slave to it, but as its architect. This is where cold power is born. Not from cruelty, but from discipline. The ability to stand inside chaos and not flinch. The ability to be insulted, challenged, or tested, and stay absolutely still. Because stillness, when others expect reaction, creates psychological pressure. And that pressure bends outcomes without effort. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. A man who wishes to deceive will always find someone willing to be deceived. In the same way, a man who reacts will always find someone eager to provoke him. The solution is simple. Stop giving them what they expect. You start controlling emotion like currency. You spend it strategically, rarely, and only for effect. If anger is needed, you unleash it with purpose. If warmth is useful, you project it with precision. You never react impulsively again. Every expression becomes a calculated message. The world starts to feel your shift before it understands it. People who once provoked you now hesitate. They can't find your buttons anymore. They can't tell if you're angry, disappointed, or completely unfazed. And that uncertainty is power. Because humans fear what they cannot read. Cold power doesn't mean detachment from feeling. It means dominance over it. You still feel everything. You just choose what deserves a response. You stop wasting energy trying to convince people. You let your silence become consequence. And the fewer explanations you give, the stronger your presence becomes. They'll say you've changed, and they'll be right. You've shifted from emotional to surgical, from expressive to strategic. You no longer need to be understood. You need to be effective. This level of control transforms everything. You negotiate differently, because you no longer negotiate from need. You lead differently, because you no longer seek approval. You move differently, because every step is chosen, never forced. People begin to feel uneasy around your calm. They project their fear onto your silence. They start guessing your motives, competing with their own imagination. And that's how control deepens, by making others respond to your rhythm, not the other way around. Cold power is patience weaponized. It's knowing that not every battle deserves your sword. That some wars are won by letting others destroy themselves. You stop arguing with fools, stop correcting liars, stop defending your truth to those committed to misunderstanding it. You learn that power doesn't beg to be seen. It waits, and lets the world come to it. That's when you become untouchable, because no one can manipulate a man who cannot be emotionally cornered. No one can disarm a mind that already predicted every possible move. No one can destroy someone who has nothing left to prove. This is the evolution the weak will never understand. They think power comes from noise, but real power is quiet. They think dominance means control over others, but true dominance is control over self. The kind that turns emotion into precision. The kind that turns patience into tension. The kind that turns every silence into a test. Cold power isn't about suppression. It's about command. It's when emotion becomes a tool, not a master. When every word, every gesture, every pause is deliberate. When people can no longer tell what you feel, only that they should be careful. You've reached the point where emotion no longer defines you. It serves you. And that's when the world begins to fear you quietly, because they finally realize nothing moves you anymore. When you master emotion, the next step is mastering perception. Because power is never only about strength. It's about what people believe about your strength. Image is currency. It buys time, obedience, and hesitation. The man who controls what others think of him controls how they act around him. Most people chase visibility. They mistake attention for authority. But visibility is exposure, and exposure invites attack. So you learn to do the opposite. You build distance. You cultivate mystery. You show only what reinforces control and conceal everything that weakens it. This is the mask of power. It is not deceit. It's design. The world reads surfaces, not souls, and if you don't craft your surface, someone else will. Your silence becomes your introduction. Your calm becomes your message. Your restraint becomes your legend. You stop explaining yourself. You let results speak. You stop arguing about your worth. You let consequence define it. The mask is not a lie, it's armor. Without it, every opinion pierces skin. Every insult draws blood. Behind it, you are untouchable. They may throw words, assumptions, envy, but none of it reaches what's real. Machiavelli advised rulers to appear merciful, faithful, humane, sincere, and religious, but to remain ready to be the opposite when necessity demands. That wasn't hypocrisy. It was survival. Because the appearance of virtue controls the masses, while the reality of control preserves the throne. You learn to wear duality the same way. Approachable, but never accessible. Kind, but never naive. Honest, but never transparent. The world can sense warmth, but it can't predict your temperature. Every gesture now carries intention. The way you enter a room, the way you pause before answering, the way you look through silence, it all builds weight. People begin to feel your presence before you speak. They lean in, cautious, curious. They sense that every word will matter, because you waste none. You start to see a shift. Those who once overlooked you now study you. Those who once mocked your calm now depend on it. Your restraint becomes intimidating, your absence suspicious, your return magnetic. That's the paradox of power. The less you reveal, the more they imagine. And imagination is far more dangerous than truth. They fill your silence with stories, some fearful, some admiring, all useful. You never correct them. You let rumor become reputation. You let reputation become leverage. Because reputation moves faster than you ever could. It enters rooms before you, shapes opinions before you arrive, wins negotiations you haven't started. You don't chase it. You engineer it. The mask also grants freedom. Behind it, you can think clearly, move silently, plan without interference. While others exhaust themselves proving identity, you operate behind illusion. People underestimate what they can't see, and that underestimation is your weapon. You become both present and absent, visible enough to command, invisible enough to maneuver. They can describe your image, but never define your intent. They can watch your actions, but never trace your motives. That gap between what they see and what you are is where dominance lives. And still, you remain calm. Because true power doesn't announce itself, it's recognized. A single look replaces a speech. A single pause replaces a threat. You don't raise your tone. The room lowers theirs. The mask must evolve with you. Too much mystery breeds paranoia. Too much openness invites familiarity. You balance the two like a mathematician balancing an equation. Reveal enough to appear human. Conceal enough to remain above them. Never mistake this for vanity. The mask isn't built to impress. It's built to protect. The moment you remove it completely, they'll dissect you. They'll look for flaws, for weakness, for vulnerability to weaponize. Power demands distance. Intimacy collapses hierarchy. So you learn to let them believe they know you while ensuring they never do. You let them feel close, but keep them orbiting. You let them admire the idea of you, because the idea cannot bleed. Behind the mask, you stay calculating, calm, deliberate. You use perception the way a sculptor uses light, to shape attention, to hide imperfection, to emphasize strength. Every legend you've ever admired was built on this principle. They didn't win because they were flawless. They won because they controlled what was visible. And that's your task now, to become the architect of how you're perceived, to make your image work for you long after you've left the room, to craft a presence that demands caution, that whispers authority, that makes people think twice before speaking your name. Because power doesn't exist in reality. It exists in memory. What they think of you, what they whisper about you, what they fear you might do. That's the empire you rule. Power that must shout isn't power. It's insecurity dressed in noise. The real kind, the kind that endures, moves quietly, like gravity. It pulls, it bends, it dictates. You don't see it. You feel it. That's how control works when it matures, not by demanding respect, but by conditioning it. Machiavelli understood this when he wrote, "Men have less scruple in offending one who makes himself loved than one who makes himself feared." Love depends on memory. Fear lives in instinct. People can forget affection. They don't forget tension. The man who masters fear doesn't inspire chaos. He builds order around his silence. You've already killed the gentle version of yourself. You've built control over emotion. You've learned to shape perception. Now comes the final refinement, learning how to command without ever needing to raise your hand, your tone, or your heart rate. Fear is not rage. Rage is loud, unstable, desperate. Fear is cold, disciplined, deliberate. It's the feeling others get when they realize your forgiveness is rarer than your retaliation, that your boundaries don't flex, that crossing you has invisible consequences. You never threaten. You never warn. You let history speak for you. Because fear built through reputation is stronger than any words. You establish it quietly, through consistency, not cruelty. You say what you mean and do exactly what you say. Once. The next time they'll remember. They'll feel it in the way they hesitate before lying, in the way their tone shifts when they speak your name. That hesitation, that pause, is where your power lives. To command fear effectively, you must remain unpredictable. Predictability is the enemy of authority. When they can anticipate your response, they stop respecting your restraint. So you move with patternless rhythm, patient most of the time, merciless when required. It takes only one clean, emotionless act of consequence to teach permanence. Never overuse fear. Excess makes it cheap. You deploy it like a weapon kept sharp, but hidden. The goal isn't terror, it's calibration. The reminder that chaos comes when your boundaries are ignored. And once the reminder is felt, it doesn't need repeating. Fear is most effective when paired with calm. Anyone can scare the weak. But when the calm man inspires unease, that's real control. Because it means your power no longer needs expression. It has become presence. You can test this easily. When you walk into a room and people adjust how they sit, how they speak, how they breathe, that's influence. They might call it respect, tension, energy. It's all the same. It's awareness of hierarchy. The secret is precision. You don't react emotionally. You design outcomes logically. You don't punish to feel dominant. You correct to restore balance. And the correction is always surgical, never dramatic. That's how order sustains itself around you. Fear also requires patience. You let people reveal themselves before deciding how to deal with them. You give them space to make mistakes, because mistakes expose intent. Once you know their true nature, your silence becomes a verdict. You don't need to shout. You don't even need to confront. You simply remove warmth and let the void do the work. Nothing frightens people more than being ignored by someone whose attention once held weight. They realize too late that your approval was access, that your silence is exile. And that exile from a mind like yours feels eternal. This is how empires are ruled, through calibration, not chaos. A ruler who acts without discipline falls with noise. A ruler who acts with timing, with balance, with cold restraint, becomes myth. Fear isn't the goal. Control is. Fear is just the shadow cast by control when it's perfected. And that's why you never chase it. You earn it. Through consistency, mystery, and precision. You've reached the point where your name carries memory. Where your absence carries meaning. Where your calm feels heavier than threat. That's not intimidation. That's design. And design is something only those with discipline can create. There comes a moment when power no longer feels like hunger. It feels like stillness. No need to prove. No need to chase. Only presence. Heavy, deliberate, unbothered. That's the throne. Not made of gold, not carved in marble, but built in the mind of a man who finally stops explaining himself to a world unworthy of his truth. You've walked through betrayal, through humiliation, through the noise of people who mistook your patience for weakness. And yet you stand here, colder, clearer, quieter. That's the transformation. Power doesn't arrive with applause. It appears when the noise of others no longer reaches you. You used to fight to be understood. Now you let misunderstanding become your disguise. You used to crave fairness. Now you see fairness for what it is, a comfort the powerful cannot afford. Because the world doesn't bend for goodness, it bends for gravity. And gravity is what you've become. The man who once reacted to every insult now chooses silence as his weapon, because silence unnerves. It forces others to fill the void with their own fear. They begin to imagine what you might do, and imagination always hurts worse than action. You've reached a level where calm feels more dangerous than anger. Because calm means control. It means you're no longer part of the chaos. You're the architect of it. You design the outcome. You decide the tempo. You decide who rises, who fades, and who never gets close again. This is not detachment. It's dominion. When you stop letting emotions steer you, you start steering everything else. The world becomes predictable. Patterns reveal themselves. People show you who they are, and you believe them the first time. You no longer argue. You no longer defend. You simply decide. Decision is your weapon now. Quiet, final, absolute. You've learned that hesitation kills faster than failure. So you act with precision, not permission. The throne you sit on is invisible because it doesn't exist in the world. It exists in perception. The powerful are not the loudest in the room. They are the ones the room adjusts for. And you've become that presence. The one people calculate around. The one they speak carefully to. The one they cannot predict, cannot reach, cannot read. They call it mystery. You call it discipline. They call it arrogance. You call it peace. You've built a reputation that doesn't need defending. Every rumor, every whisper, every story adds to the myth. You never correct them. Because every misunderstanding keeps your enemies chasing shadows while you move in silence. That's how rulers stay in power. Not by showing strength, but by becoming an idea. Ideas cannot be killed, exposed, or reasoned with. They exist above emotion, above slander, above fear. You are no longer a participant in the game. You are the atmosphere it plays within. Machiavelli once wrote that the highest form of rule is to appear necessary. You've gone further. You've become inevitable. People don't follow you because they want to. They follow because the alternative feels uncertain, unstable, unsafe. And in a world terrified of uncertainty, your silence becomes order itself. Now the world speaks your language. Deliberate pauses, measured tones, unspoken hierarchies. Your name has gravity. Your absence has weight. And your calm, your terrifying calm, has become legend. This is the final evolution, the place where emotion becomes data, pain becomes clarity, and isolation becomes empire. You don't need revenge. You don't need validation. You don't even need understanding. Because you've realized something only the few ever do. The ultimate power isn't over others. It's over yourself. So you sit on the throne of silence. Not lonely, sovereign, not bitter, awake. You no longer react to the world. You watch it react to you. You've stopped seeking crowns because your presence became one. And now, the choice stands before you. You can step back into the noise, or stay here, above it, where power breathes in quiet rooms and decisions echo louder than words. If this message reached something deep in you, if it reminded you of what you were always meant to become, then don't just leave. Prove you're awake. Like this video. Comment the moment you realized you'd been too soft for too long. Subscribe. Not for motivation, but for transformation. Because this isn't inspiration. This is initiation. And those who understand it don't need to be told twice. Welcome to the throne of silence, to the final form of power, to the world as Machiavelli saw it, and as you will now command it.